My name is Dan Dorval, and I'm President and CEO of Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. I am an independent certified financial planner and author of my book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Reality Based Financial Planning for Mainstream America.
Hi, my name is Leah Woodley. I'm an associate financial advisor with Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. Our conversations discuss what it means to do quality of life planning in all areas of your life. And you've been incredibly busy lately. What's been going on in your meetings?
Well, this week we had a very unusual situation. What happened was I worked with a family, many years ago. She was a nurse that I started working with probably 20 years ago. And she was married, she had some kids, and their finances were not in very good shape. They had two earners, they made good money, but they just weren't handling it very well. So I was helping them, working through our group advisory relationship with one of the hospitals we work with. And ultimately, so they were making positive strides. Ultimately, her husband gets very sick. And it was one of the saddest situations I ever dealt with. He was sick for a long time. It was a lot of stress on her, a lot of stress. Their kids were still in school. So it was a very difficult situation for them. And he passes away. Now, along the way, we had implemented a $1 million 20-year term policy with them. The policy paid out. So now she has $1 million tax free to be able to help maintain quality of life for their household. Now, to this point, they've been working with me as their advisor, but now she has money. And so when you have money, and we see this all the time. You hear stories about professional athletes or celebrities or people who win a lottery. Maybe they inherit a bunch of money. Now they have money, maybe for the first time in their lives. And people start coming out of the woodwork, family and friends and all these different people. And a lot of times, financial advisors, all of a sudden, these wealth manager types start to come out of the woodwork and go, hey, I can help you manage that wealth. And so what happened is she was in a very vulnerable position. And family members started to recommend other people. She worked with an estate attorney that was recommended to her that did some things that I looked at and said, you should not be doing that. But yet it was his expertise. And, she said, well, I have to trust him. And I go, well, he was focused more on estate taxes and things that were never going to affect them. And
Mhm.
I told her, our approach is your quality of life. If there are taxes or other issues, that comes secondary to her quality of life. And it's a fundamentally different perspective than many attorneys, CPAs, wealth manager types, where they're saying, hey, I can save you taxes in some hypothetical world 30 years from now. And we're like, we don't care about that. We care about you right now and getting through this very difficult time in your life. And so she started to get connected with these other people. And a very influential family member recommended that she use a different advisor. So she ends up leaving her group. She goes to this other advisor. Now, it was actually two different groups. One was a Northwestern Mutual life insurance agent. He sold her a big permanent life insurance policy that the premium was like 15% of her earned income. But he goes, well, you've got this money over here from the life insurance settlement to help pay this premium, which was only going to benefit her kids down the road. And it was not her goal to
Mhm.
benefit her kids, but it sounded like, he positioned it like it's in your best interest to do this. Well, it clearly wasn't, but he did that. And then the other group, they were an investment manager group. They didn't talk to her about her pension. They didn't talk to her about how she was going to ultimately make some very difficult Social Security decisions based off of her survivor benefit from her spouse and her own retirement benefit on her own earnings records. And so they didn't talk about that. So now, 10 years later, she comes back to us and she said, can I meet with you again? And she's getting close to retiring. She's coming up on 65. She's getting close to retiring. And we sit down for an hour and a half. We go through all these different things and lay out Okay, this is how it's all going to work with your pension, with your social security, with your investments. How are you going to maintain the cash flow you need in order to maintain quality of life? And thankfully, she is in an okay position to be able to do that.
Mhm.
But she goes, this is so different from any of the discussions that I've ever had with these other groups. And I really like these other people. They're
Mhm.
very nice people, which I hear all the time. These advisor types, they're very personable, they're very likable. And so she's like, okay, what do I do? She was
Mhm.
getting really confused because she's hearing something from them, she's hearing something from us. And I said, you just have to make a decision about which team you feel comfortable with helping you through this process. And this week, she decided, okay, I want to work with your team again. And, that's what we're doing now. But she did that because we were putting all the puzzle pieces together and helping her understand her meaning and purpose of why she's doing the things she's doing rather than just saying, you should do this. And she appreciated that so much. Now, it was hard for her to change those relationships because it came from like family recommendations, and those family members don't know us. So, she made this difficult decision this week. And my suggestion out to, if you think about our viewers watching this, for widows in particular, we help a lot of widows.
Mhm.
And they are so vulnerable in many cases. They don't have anybody to bounce these things off of. All of a sudden, they've got people offering advice, and you should be doing this, and you should be doing this, and you should be doing this. And sometimes that might be well intentioned, but maybe not the best approach. And so you have to be super careful when you're selecting the types of people who are going to counsel you in these situations.
That is very important. When you said that we looked at all the puzzle pieces, I think sometimes when you're dealing with wealth managers, even with the estate attorney, I know they have a specialization, but they're not necessarily considering the totality of her pick, what is most important to her. It's really important because you really can't give sound advice without knowing everything and without knowing what she is trying to accomplish. And so many times we see advisors who are wealth managers, and I'm not going against all wealth managers, but sometimes the focus is on one isolated situation, performance, getting the best return on your portfolio, and they're not thinking about all the intricacies of this person's life. And how can you really advise and support and guide this person, especially through this major transition of widowhood? How can you provide advice if you're not thinking about everything?
So, where we see that all the time is most advisors have a really difficult time of quantifying their value. And yet they really want to quantify their value. If you're going to pay me fees in some way, shape, or form, I want to show you that those fees are somehow resulting in a greater return to you. And
Mhm.
so, what they'll do all the time is they talk about taxes, and
Mhm.
they'll use some sort of hypothetical. So attorneys do this with estate taxes a lot of times, and then advisors do it with income taxes a lot of times. And they'll show you this hypothetical where 30 years down the road, if all of these assumptions happen, which they never do, I mean, life is too messy for that to happen. But if all of these assumptions work out exactly the way we're showing them to you, and of course they control the inputs,
Mhm.
you will have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes over your lifetime. And in this case, the attorney, for example, showed her an illustration. They didn't have enough money to be affected by federal estate taxes. But here in Minnesota, we have Minnesota estate taxes. And in this case, they still didn't have enough for that to kick in. In Minnesota, it's $3 million. They don't have $3 million. They had about 1.5 million between house and investments and whatever. And that was that $1 million term life policy, right? So he was looking at it and he showed some assumed rate of growth and assumed estate taxes, which were static, and said, when you die, So this is the wife. Now, the wife at the time was in her 50s in good health with very likely longevity. I mean, we don't know that, but very like longevity. And he
Mhm.
said, down the road, when your kids inherit this, they're going to save Minnesota estate taxes. Now she's stuck in a trust that limits her ability to access the money. They have to file trust tax returns every year that cost her $900 to prepare every year. And she's like, what do I do with this trust? Like, can I get rid of it? And I
Mhm.
go, the trust was established for a variety of reasons. We have to trust the attorneys and their recommend. That's their expertise. That's not our
Mhm.
expertise. We know a lot about it, but that's not our expertise. And yet, the reason he did this is not because he did something wrong.
Right.
That's not the issue. He competently did his work. It was perspective.
Yes.
He was focused on taxes. And
Mhm.
I looked at it and I said, we don't even know if you're going to be subject to estate taxes down the road. I'm focused on you living and maintaining quality of life for you and your family today.
Mhm.
And yes, you should not pay excess taxes in any way that are ridiculous. But for the most part, her situations are situation. Like she's
Right.
almost for sure never going to be subject to estate taxes. And so it was such a difficult conversation because then she goes, but he's the one telling me to do this. And now you're
Mm.
telling me something different, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. That has to be frustrating for her. Not knowing what to do and not knowing what to trust. It's one of those situations where she doesn't know what she doesn't know, and you kind of have to go with your gut and trust the person that you feel is having your best interest. Not to say that the attorney didn't have her best interest at heart, but like you said, he was focused on taxes. But what is important is those things are going to bring her quality of life and what she's trying to accomplish. um, and I see, especially on social media right now, trust being just thrown out there when they're not for everyone. Everyone does not need a trust. Some people do. There are some circumstances where a trust is necessary, but it's not just one of those things that everyone should just go out and get.
It's the same thing with life insurance on social media. You see these people just saying, hey, it's a tax free death benefit. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, it is a tax free death benefit. And at the same time, you have to die in order for that
Right.
benefit to be paid, which means somebody else is going to benefit. And you might be sacrificing your quality of life today in
Mhm.
exchange for this future type of benefit down the road. And I'm not talking about like family protection type life insurance, like that term policy that we did for him was hugely important to maintain quality of life for the family. That's where you leverage death
Mhm.
benefit in order to protect people. I'm talking about the people who are doing it for tax purposes or
Right.
investment purposes. Those
Mhm.
are the wrong reasons. If somebody's approaching you almost entirely from a tax discussion and it's not a CPA,
Right.
you probably don't want to do business with that advisor. They're taking a perspective that's very, very limiting from a quality of life perspective.
Right. And now she's constrained and confined and wanting to get out of this thing, and she's kind of stuck and having to pay this annual fee, the annual taxes on the trust and everything like that. It's just unfortunate for her.
Well, and now that she's had time to reflect, she's no longer in that grieving period.
Hmm.
She described to us, she felt a lot of, shame and guilt for
Mm.
having left our group. But she said, at the time, I was just letting those decisions go to other people. I just didn't feel strong enough and empowered enough
Yeah.
to make those decisions on my behalf. And I relied on other people to do that. And now she goes, I realized that was probably a mistake. And we understand
Yeah.
that that happens to people when they deal with, death or
Hmm.
divorce or these major life transitions where the last thing you want to deal with are your finances.
Yeah, it's an extremely vulnerable time, an extremely vulnerable time. And sometimes people prey on that. Sometimes people do think that they have your best interest at heart, but it may not actually be what's best for you.
Yeah.
So that's really hard. Anything else you want to add, Dan?
Yeah, I think it's just a really important conversation to have. And, you know, we hope, and this again goes to like our group agreements, is
Mhm.
she had access to come back to us without being a personal client. She came
Right.
back to us because she was a nurse,
Mhm.
and we were compensated to help her even though she had other advisors. And then ultimately that led to her saying, okay, my trust is stronger in you guys than it is with these other people. And we hear that trust thing thrown around a lot where it's, hey,
Mhm.
I was provided this benefit through my employer or my association or whatever, and I didn't know who to trust, but I met with you and now it's a completely different experience. They get to do that
Mhm.
without having commitments and pressure and obligations and things like that. So for her situation, that helped her a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do see that all the time. There are often many other employees who come into us that may have other advisors, and it may be a circumstance where, their advisor doesn't understand their pension, or they do want that second opinion. And for us to be able to offer this to them at no cost to them is something that is invaluable.
Absolutely.
Well, Dan, thank you for having this conversation. I hope it helps someone. And until next time, take care.
Thanks, Leah.